Well, as we get into the finer points of the Department of Homeland Security strategy and some of the deportations and the rumors and the criticisms, there is a subject brought up time and time again. This is that U.S. military veterans are being deported and they're being shipped off cruelly, those kinds of things. So we wanted to bring on Ben Krause. He's a veterans advocate and attorney to talk a little bit about these news stories and these events kind of being alleged to have gone on. Ben, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me on, Toto.
So break it down for us. How much of this so far, at least in the discussion around U.S. veterans being deported, how much of that is perhaps as much of a five-alarm fire as it's being portrayed, and then how much is being kind of misconstrued and kind of various angles from different press outlets?
Great question. So there are, I think at a high level, just to get some context, right? Since I would say about the past 100 years or so, we've had almost 1 million non-citizen veterans who have gone through the process to become citizens through their military service. So I think the most recent numbers came from the Congressional Research Office saying something to that effect. Anyway, the data was somewhere in the ballpark of about 801,000 who have gone through this process, right? So our country has, for since Civil War at least, relied on foreigners to help in certain times of need. And so it's just important to understand that this is part of who we are. This is part of our national history.
The naturalization process, sure.
100%. And so it's there, it's real. On the other hand, today, the numbers are important to know that we have 40,000-ish foreigners who are working in our military now, in the military, serving honorably, hopefully, with our U.S. citizens. So about 40,000. I would say the ballpark is maybe 140,000 veterans are in the U.S. who are considered non-citizens, who have not gone through the naturalization process. As far as, boiling it down further, the data shows that we're probably in the ballpark of, I think it was like 250 are confirmed deportees in the past decade or so, through DHS's data. And then boiling it down further, it doesn't look like the numbers are radically huge, which is great for one reason, in the sense that it's not a huge issue, meaning we can fix it, right? With the right policies, the right procedures in place, making sure that veterans who should be deported, if that is a thing, then it's done the right way, in a humane way that I think everyone can agree with. And also catching the ones that shouldn't be deported and making sure that they're receiving the right type of process and procedures that are afforded to individuals who did serve our country at one point in time.
So some of the individuals kind of in that last group there who are perhaps being set to be deported or have been deported, who are veterans who served in the United States military for a time but did not go through the naturalization process, are those individuals who are here, do they have a valid visa, either a student visa or a work visa, or on a particular visa process that grants them access to live in the United States?
So they're usually, I think the term is legal permanent resident. And so they're LPRs, and they essentially have a green card. So a lot of these individuals are here legally, but they're targeted for deportation, usually because of a past criminal record, is generally what's going on.
Mm. So these kind of criminal record offenses, because I want to be precise, because otherwise, if you argue from kind of like the top down, then you can kind of get into the weeds really, really quickly. So for those who have been deported listing criminal offenses, what specific criminal offenses are we talking about that these individuals who here on a green card, a legal permanent resident, what are the crimes levied against them that they're being deported for?
So usually it's a cross between either an aggravated offense, meaning it's something that they did to hurt somebody else, or it deals with drug use.
Okay.
It seemed to be the two that break down. And then from there, what we're noticing is that a lot of times it'll be a veteran who serves their time in a U.S. penitentiary or jail or something to that effect. And then sometime later, which could be immediately after getting out of prison, then they're subject to deportation at that point. Or individuals who maybe had a criminal activity in the far distant past, but who haven't resolved, whatever it might be in front. And I'm just to qualify, not a immigration attorney. I'm a veteran rights attorney, so I focus on veteran things. So my knowledge of exactly how the INS system or how the ICE system works is not my area of practice. But basically the gist of it is, the individuals that are running into these issues usually committed some kind of felony. And at that point, they've either been rehabilitated through what we would normally think of as, they paid their time and then they get out from jail or from prison. And then they're subject to deportation because of that criminal past. And that's usually what we're seeing.
So do you think that maybe a possible solution for this kind of going into the future would be that there's a heavier focus on naturalization for immigrants who choose to serve in the United States military?
I think making a more streamlined process when they're in the military would be a key help in this way. When you're going through in the military, sometimes procedures are not necessarily followed, or if you're enlisted, which most of these individuals were, they don't necessarily have access to resources, and when they apply, it gets bounced out, and they end up not completing while they're in, and so they have an expedited path when they're in the military. And then I think there's a 6-month gap afterwards where if they didn't finish the process, they still have 6 months to get it done. I know a lot of folks, veterans just generally, when you're coming back after deployment, especially, the veterans that I work with as an attorney, where they came back, they suffered like a TBI, PTSD, or some combination therein. When they get out of the service, it usually takes them up to 5 years or longer to really get bearings on life if they don't receive immediate care in service and after service. Some veterans get that kind of care, a lot don't. And so it takes a long time to kind of figure out what planet you're on, in my opinion, if you're dealing with those types of conditions, based on the feedback I've received from clients and also my own experience getting out of the military and taking a long time to assimilate to being a civilian. So there's not a long gap in between getting out and then that first period where after 6 months, then they don't have the same advantages that they had in the service.
So if we kind of extend out some of those windows and make it a little bit easier, a little bit more, we can say that about 150 different government processes and things of that nature, we create an environment that makes it a more both comprehensive, both in kind of the terms of vetting and then also how we handle kind of the offload after their service regarding naturalization and getting some of those processes a little bit easier to understand. Again, making that a framework and a pathway that isn't the red tape express, then I can see that making it a lot easier. Then we look at the individuals right now. So those who have been deported, who are veterans, and you talked about some what you consider to be solutions for that situation there because a kind of a relatively small number. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, yeah. So basically the number, as we're aware, seems to be small. Now, I've seen other numbers in Congress where they were speculating that the number might be higher, into the thousands. As far as those that are deported, I'm looking right now at a Facebook a group called Deported Veterans Support House, which is an interesting mission. And I haven't talked to them yet, but basically it's a support house in Tijuana for veterans that are deported, where when you're deported, obviously you don't usually have a lot of resources or access to your VA benefits in the same way you normally would. So they have resources there and in other areas within Mexico, at least, to help that group. But it's not a lot. And I think that really what would be probably a bigger fix would be if ICE and DHS would mainly follow the recommendations fully that came out from the GAO back in 2019, where it was highlighted that ICE and DHS were not following the policies and procedures that are designed for veterans because in our context, the country does owe a debt to veterans, and our Congress has codified that through a series of laws, as well as the agency at the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs. And veterans who did serve, at least if you weren't dishonorably discharged, are entitled to a series of benefits. We can't really access those often unless we're in the U.S. or if we're overseas in a kind of a voluntary way, in a country that has systems set up by VA to facilitate that process, such as the Philippines. And there's other countries like that where they have VA hospitals. It's easy to get to. But I think that the point that I'm trying to make here is that if we had a system that was very clear and streamlined while in the military, this would bypass the problem altogether.
Oh, sure.
And then, obviously, and then focusing on the veterans that maybe slip through the cracks and taking kind of a more habilitative and rehabilitative approach with those that did run afoul of the law, but pay their time, pay their dues, and are ready to become taxpayers again, ready to work in the U.S. They made a mistake before, but have paid their time. Having a path for them and not necessarily bouncing them out. Because if you do pay your time, as a veteran myself, I have a lot of sympathy for those folks anyway. And there's a lot of programs out there for veterans because a lot of veterans run into some challenges because of our disabilities from service. A lot of the cases that we are seeing in the press, there's not a ton of these cases, right? But the ones that are published at The Guardian and elsewhere do have compelling facts where veteran X has a Purple Heart. And there are quite a few of those examples where they do get deported. And those veterans in particular, I have a soft spot for. Let's try to figure this out, make sure that they don't get moved to a country they've never lived in, which has happened in a couple instances, or at least they haven't lived in for many, many decades, and then we deport them. So I think that type of process is inappropriate, at least when it comes to how we treat veterans, especially veterans that ran afoul of the law, they paid their time, and now they're ready to move forward. Oftentimes they have families here that are waiting for them to get out. Let's try to, unify that, be pro-family, pro-veteran, and come up with a solution that works for America.
And I think that, first of all, a lot of this arises from the kind of spaghetti bowl of policy, where essentially you have a series of laws regarding immigration in the State Department that say one thing, and then you also have a list of rules, laws, benefits that are provided based on military service that are also provided. And the problem is there are instances in which those run afoul of each other because they weren't written with each other in mind. This is why, and I talk about this on the state side often, about how a lot of representatives and senators want to get in and just pass laws. Well, unless you're going to get out the kitchen shears and hack through the entire bowl of spaghetti and break all the noodles, you have to be really careful in how you do it. And I think this is an instance where it's become so convoluted. You have a lot of members on the right saying, sorry, the state and the immigration laws are the laws, rules are rules. And that's true. And then also you say, well, Congress also passed a lot of laws that said, hey, if you are a veteran, if you have served, we owe you a system of benefits that is part of the agreement that you signed on the dotted line for when the recruiter overeagerly got out there and invited you in for a cup of coffee. All right. So those kinds of issues are what these things stem from, certainly. Especially amid broader policy pushes. But I think that handling those who have been deported on a case-by-case basis, that are seeking kind of an overturning of that situation, looking at those based on the kind of charge that we're talking about, based on whether a debt's already been paid, based on obviously providing the services that are still there, and then reframing and reshaping those laws, that's the best way forward substantively. It requires hard work because it requires people to sit down and go, okay, look, things kind of a mess. So let's go through. God knows we're probably going to have to break a few eggs to do this. We'll probably won't get it right at first, but let's at least start that process. That's the move, right? I mean, this is something that I understand and very, very much, obviously for a lot of personal reasons, that you and I've already talked about. I sympathize with the different sides. I don't even say different sides of this argument because there's no one here that's like, screw veterans. No one's doing that. What I want to see here is people who understand there's something broken. One side is more upset with one side of the law. The other side is upset with kind of the other side of the law. Some are upset with the execution of the laws. But what we want is something that is more clear, something that is very obvious. And I think that once something is, cut and dried, it removes a lot of opportunity for discomfort and arguments that turn into things that are far uglier than they need to be, or decisions that turn out to be far uglier than they need to be.
Well, yeah, absolutely. I think that here in this instance, we're not talking about a lot of veterans. We're not talking about a lot of resources probably to get this fixed. I think they should create and mandate an office within the Department of Veterans Affairs to specifically target this group, and to when somebody is flagged, that INS or that ICE has to route it right through the VA to double check. Let's make sure, at least for this population, that we're not making a mistake. Let's make sure that this is the right person that we want to get out of here, right? And so if we're dealing with somebody that is a There are going to be instances where maybe it does make sense. But I think by and large, if a veteran did serve honorably, and so we're talking about veterans who are honorably discharged or general under honorable conditions, these are people that probably did a good job, that probably have the ethics to make it through the military because they did make it. Let's make sure that the path for these folks, especially if you have a Purple Heart and were injured in combat, let's make sure that we give them a closer look.
Yep.
These are great stories for our country and a great success later to show our benevolence and our ability to start anew. And if there's anything in our country that our country should stand for, it is definitely a second chance.
This is something that there are cases, certain cases. So, for example, is a very, just off to the side anecdote here. This is one of the reasons why, for those who choose to self-deport, I think that the 10-year ban on when you're deported, you can't reapply to the United States for 10 years. That should be banned immediately, and there should be a portal for those. You choose to self-deport, congratulations. There's a new line over here just for you. All right, and again, this is also why I think that, and this is very, very little off to base here, but I'll put on my Teddy Roosevelt spectacles here, and I'm more a fan of certain external American territories where individuals who are applying for citizenship could go to, where there's a streamlined vetting process kind of set up, or expanded consulates, for example, an American district in Mexico City, for example, if you catch what I'm saying there, that do provide VA services for those under these circumstances. Because not only do I want to keep this number of deported veterans ridiculously small, we're talking count them on one hand on your best day small, I want every case to be so cut and dried, so clear that even the individual who was deported agrees with the decision that was made and has opportunities forward. Because again, like you said, the kinds of what they were deported for, if they've already served a prison sentence for something, that changes the calculus here. And I think that having certain small externalities for policies makes a lot of sense. And when you can have this kind of conversation, and I'm not, calling you whatever, you're not calling me whatever. I don't know what your politics are. I don't care. I know that you care about veterans. I know you're passionate about getting them what they need. I know that our audience, our people are the same way. And if we can actually kind of get past a lot of the junk, the tepid bathwater of politics, as I call it, and go through some of these cases individually and then create a stopgap so that we don't get a bunch more of these cases that are uncertain and bothersome, so that there need to be Facebook groups that are likely to get, maybe they provide great services, maybe they get hyper political, maybe they get both. What a headache. Instead of needing the headache, actually getting some things built, that kind of pioneering and building and rectifying problems is also a key thing that the United States is built on.
Well, and I think this is a topic where it's an easy win, right? This is an easy win.
Well put.
Politics. This is a slam dunk for optics. Hey, you know what? I want President Trump to be a winner. I want every president of our country to be a winner. I want them to do the best that they can do for our country. America first, 100%. And I think in this context, this is a slam dunk right now for the Trump administration. He has the majority in the House and the Senate, arguably the majority in the Supreme Court. Hey, let's have a slam dunk and a big win for vets. And get this done. We're talking about 100,000 veterans that are in the U.S. right now that are non-citizens. Let's take a hard look at this and have a righteous path forward for success for these folks. It is a limited number of people. We can get this done. The resources are already there. It just, you got to flick a switch and have a couple people that are added, have this as an added duty or whatever it is, and get it done. And I think it's an easy win for this administration to hammer on. And, hey, we're all pro-veteran, I think, or at least the majority of the people are in the U.S. So let's get this done. I think the majority of, whether you're right or left, the majority of people in this country want veterans to succeed. They want our country to be safe. They want safe streets, good jobs. I think most people want that, whether you're a Democrat or Republican. And so in this context, hey, let's win by solving this issue.
And framed like that, I think that it definitely has a pretty decent chance to do exactly that. Ben Krause, cannot thank you enough for giving us a bit of your time. I would check out his stuff, benjaminkrauselaw.com. Is that all right to send people there?
Absolutely. And I have a
Oh,
blog
excellent.
called.
I just wanted to triple check. We could always obviously have that edited out if that's not where you wanted people sent. But
No, it's great. That's great. I do blog a lot on disabledveterans.org. And so that's where we
Thank
publish
you.
regular news about VA in my capacity as a journalist. But I spend most of my time as an attorney, working full time helping vets.
Absolutely. Well, hey, thanks again for your time, and we'll have you back soon.
Yeah. Thanks for the time.